Hey, everybody, welcome to a new episode of Need to Know. We're coming to you globally today. I'm Bryce Zabel. I'm up north of Los Angeles. And let me bring in my partner in crime here, Ross Coulthard, who is somewhere south of Sydney. How you doing, Roscoe?
G'day from down under. How are you, Bryce? I see you've been gallivanting around UFO conferences the last week.
It's been a busy last month for me, but you're right. Yeah, last week I was at the International UFO Congress, which was in Mesa, Arizona this week, put on by Karen Berard and Alejandro Rojas, and lots of people there, a lot of good information being exchanged. And then I also, right after that, did the Q&A here in Los Angeles at LA Live with James Fox over his new Moment of Contact movie. So it's been a busy time.
Now, you gave a speech, I understand, at the Congress, along with a number of other panelists, on the issue of estimate of the situation. Will 2023 sizzle or fizzle? What did you decide?
Well,
What did you decide?
Well, you and I have talked about this enough. You probably already know all this. In fact, we talked about it in the last episode. I feel like we're going to get some sizzle here. Everything I hear from my sources and that you seem to hear from your sources, and the way people are talking seems to be that there are some surprises ahead. And if I had to put my chips on the table and go all in on either one, I'd go in on sizzle over fizzle.
Well, we do know, my friend, that as of late last year, the National Defense Authorization Act of the United States Congress required that no later than the 31st of October 2022, and annually for the next 4 years on, the director shall, in consultation with the Secretary of Defense, submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report on unidentified aerial phenomena. So the big question is, what is that report going to say?
You are really singing from my prayer book, my friend, because I've been riding this train since July when we first were talking about it. And we got the calendar out and said October 31st is when they'll put it out, because that's the last one they had to put out. They could put it out on as late as June 25th, 2021, and that's the day they put it out. So I think we can bet for October 31st. And a couple of comments. One, that's Halloween, so that's kind of interesting. Nice surprise there, and maybe we'll get candy as well. Who knows? And then the second part of that is, of course, that it is 8 days before the U.S. midterms. So if something actually major comes out in that, it could be political. It could get into various debates. I mean, certainly some of the candidates
could be the October surprise.
Well,
Bryce,
that's
as
what
you wisely speculated.
That is the train I've been riding on, my friend. So you actually have heard from a few people who, because listen, up until now, whenever I start blathering on about the October surprise, I get told by people, hey, settle down, settle down. Maybe they'll postpone it. It might not be that big a deal, and et cetera. And I keep thinking, well, given where they were in the last one from June 25th of 2021, the October 31st, 2022 is going to have to advance that debate somewhat. And I keep thinking it could have something that could be kind of memorable in it. What are you hearing?
Well, mate, frankly, a flaccid dead rat would be better than what was delivered in June 2021. I mean, really, it wasn't much. But I am actually hearing that things could be interesting at the end of this month, that there may be something coming up. But look, I have to admit, I've been wavering between optimism and dark pessimism recently. I'm very worried that because of the international situation, the deteriorating economic situation, there are so many things coming on the agenda that are distracting our opinion leaders in Congress from making a decision about what to do as far as congressional hearings go. And I'm still, I suppose, optimistic, but I err to the belief that there are forces that are incredibly powerful who are going to try and, yes, there will be whistleblowers, but they're going to try and keep it all in camera, in private committee in the Congress. And also, as our friend Chris Sharp has pointed out in an article that he did for his Liberation Times and the Daily Mail on the last week or so, there've already been hearings. There are already witnesses who've come forward. And Chris is punting in his article, basically saying that he thinks from what he's hearing from his sources, that we are talking about revelations of possible crash retrievals, and that there might in fact be admissions being made, if not already made, about crash retrievals and back engineering programs. So I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic for the end of this month.
That jives with some of what I'm hearing. And I just want to differentiate. When you said you thought the June 25th, 2021 report that was released was not such a big deal. I want to make clear something. There was a May 17th of 2022 hearing that I for sure agree with you was a complete flaccid piece of wet lettuce, and not a good not a good indicator of where we're going. But I really do want to stand up for the June 25th, 2021 report. I've read it again recently. And while, listen, I would have liked it if they would have just said, and we got a wreckage here and this happened then. And they didn't do that. But again, that report did something that was radical for the U.S. government. It admitted that they were real. Yeah. And it said, we don't make them. So
I'll give you that. That is significant. And more importantly, it admitted that it could not prosaically explain the vast majority, 143 out of 144 events that they were looking at, involving mainly military sightings. So yeah, I'll give you that. But I'm still, I guess, in the context of what you and I know about the history of the phenomenon, it does seem irksome that here we are 77 years on from the end of World War II, and we're still arguing about some pretty silly things about whether or not the Congress should be disclosing it. So I'm looking in terms of the last century, frankly, and what really is known on the public record in official documents and in historical records, and how there is this cognitive dissonance between what we know from the history and what's being admitted. Why has it taken so long? What do they know that they don't want to reveal?
This is why we're such good friends, because I love anybody that can drop the line cognitive dissonance in a sentence. And I love that because it is cognitive dissonance. It's where you know something to be true, but you're actually being told that it's not. And you just can't square that thing. Listen, I want to just go back for a moment to the IUFOC where I spoke last week that we started talking about. There were a lot of people there that were, kind of interesting people. Brian Bender from Politico, Alejandro Rojas, Micah Hanks from The Debrief, Michael Masters was there. So was John Ramirez, Travis Walton, David Marler, James Fox, Len Katai. I mean, a lot of interesting people. And the thing that I took away from it, or two things. One, attendance was way down. And I think that's because the pandemic has just gotten people out of the habit of getting out of the house. So it's going to take some rebuilding for them. They've had to be virtual the last 2 years. But I thought there was a lot of energy in the rooms that were there because people know that we're on the 5th anniversary in 2 months of that New York Times reporting that kind of, put us all out there and got us going. So I found a lot of energy there. And I think that a lot of people are very similar to what you and I are doing. We know enough to feel that there is the possibility of huge change, radical change. And at the same time, we hear the rumblings that there is a pushback going on among the people who actually are, running the situation. So yeah, it's a tough choice for everybody. But again, there is reason for some optimism. And that's kind of what I want to put out here today.
There's another anniversary too. It's not just the 5th anniversary of the New York Times 2017 story coming up, but it's also coming up to it's the 20th anniversary of the Admiral Wilson memo, the EWD notes, the purported meeting between Admiral Tom Wilson of the DIA, formerly of the DIA, and Dr. Eric Davis in a car park outside EG&G's headquarters in Las Vegas. Did it happen? We're going to get more into that a bit later, aren't we, Bryce?
It's like a spy novel, the Wilson Davis memo, and we keep talking about it. And I have to say, I was on a panel that was moderated by Brian Bender of Politico, and it had Alejandro and Micah Hanks and myself and Michael Masters on. And the most contentious part of that panel was Brian asking everybody what they thought about the Wilson Davis memo. Brian thought it was fake. Alejandro thought he was skeptical. So there was some difference of opinion on it. I think there's a lot to it, and that's why, folks, in the next segment we're going to be talking about it. In fact, Ross, you and I are going to do a dramatic interp of it because it's been accused of reading like a screenplay sometimes. So we feel like if it reads like a screenplay, maybe a couple of hack actors like us should try to talk about it. Listen, there's just a little more housekeeping we should do while we're in our first segment here, just because there's so many interesting things that are going on right now. Our mutual friend Ben Hansen has broken a story about the so-called racetrack UFOs, and those are UFOs that have been seen by numerous commercial pilots in August of this year. And he's done a deep dive into it. The Debrief just today did their own article talking about it, and so just hats off to Ben for some good solid investigative reporting. We like to hear that.
And can I also mention, well, before we go on from that one, can I also mention it's very significant what Ben's revealed, because one of the things that I think his investigation highlights is that whilst there's now a requirement that mandates that military pilots come forward with their sightings of UAPs, there's no such equivalent with commercial pilots. And so what I thought was really heartening was that Ryan Graves, our mutual friend, the ex-FA-18 pilot, who we interviewed a few weeks ago, he's part of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and it has established 3 committees to study UAPs and how these incursions are affecting pilot and passenger safety, and to coordinate with government agencies and international researchers. And so it's actually quite an exciting development that a reputable international body like the AIAA, which is a peak organization for aeronautics and astronautics, is actually engaging and taking this issue seriously. And I think it's only to be applauded. And Ryan's working with Ravi Kopparapu, a planetary scientist at NASA, and they're damn serious about getting to the bottom of this and collecting data, which I think is an absolutely key issue.
It not only is it key, Ross, but what I like about that story and some of the other organizations, from the Galileo Project to the Enigma folks and to, just all of the things that we've been talking about, that world, that's part of the reason for my optimism. It is that we no longer must wait only for the government or any government to tell us something about what's real. We can do a lot of this research for ourselves. And so, for example, these commercial pilots in the racetrack UFO situation, some of them are still worried about stigma. They're still worried that if they could even find somebody to report this to, that they would be made fun of or possibly grounded. And, I think it's 2022. It's a little late in the game to be making our commercial pilots afraid to tell people about things that they actually see with their own eyes and with their own equipment. So hopefully we're going to be able to put those kind of things to bed. And
now we would be remiss, Bryce, in not acknowledging our friend and colleague James Fox's fantastic premiere of Moment of Contact, which I think you were the co-host of. You actually interviewed James on stage, didn't you? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Thank you for bringing that up. It's James was not only at the IUFOC, but then as soon as I left that, he had the world premiere of his Moment of Contact film here in Los Angeles at the LA Live Regal Theater, which is a lovely, impressive, giant theater. And it was really astonishing to watch his film, which I had seen, as you had, on our computers at home. This one was gigantic. I mean, it was like watching it on an IMAX, really, really stellar. And I did. I introduced James, who introduced his film, and then the film came on. And then afterwards, we did the Q&A. And what I thought was fun about the Q&A is that a lot of times in Hollywood, the studios, when they have a movie come out, will just have somebody who maybe has seen the movie, doesn't really know that much about it. It certainly isn't there to pull anything really radical out of anybody other than some stories from the set. Instead, James got me. And I've seen the film twice, and I know a few things about it. And I thought it was very interesting to sit down with him and pull apart some of the interesting things that are in it. For those of you who don't know, Moment of Contact is James's passion. James Fox's passion project. It deals with the Varginha UFO crash and retrieval with bodies and all of that in Varginha, Brazil in 1996, 2 years after the case in is it Rwanda? Is not Rwanda.
Zimbabwe.
In Zimbabwe, excuse me. Yeah. So a fascinating case. And James literally went to Brazil and talked to all the witnesses. And it literally is, as the film suggests, the Roswell of Brazil. So it was fascinating for him to do it because it literally proves the point of why you and I do this podcast. Okay. You and I are doing it. You're in Australia and I'm here in the United States. And yeah, we have some technical issues from time to time because we're trying to do a streaming podcast. But the underlying reality of what we're trying to do is to say, this isn't a United States problem and the United States is not in charge of it. The world is dealing with this issue right now. And that includes your country and it includes Brazil. And anyway, for people that would like to know a little bit more about it, it's a good watch. It's not in theaters. It's streaming. It's called Moment of Contact. It's the James Fox follow-up to his brilliant film, The Phenomenon.
Now, coming up next on Need to Know, we finally delve into the intriguing mystery of the so-called EWD notes, the Admiral Wilson memo. We go Broadway.
Can't wait.
Welcome back to Need to Know. Now, as Bryce mentioned at the UFO Congress, one of the issues that came up in the panel that he was a co-panelist on is the Admiral Wilson memo. And for those of us who aren't aware of this document, it's an alleged record of a conversation that took place between Dr. Eric Davis, a renowned and well-respected aerospace physicist, who works for the Aerospace Corporation now, and Admiral Tom Wilson, who was at the time the immediate past former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency of the United States Defense Department. And in that memo, there are recorded alleged transcripts of the most extraordinary conversation. And the big issue that Bryce and I have been discussing for many, many moons is just how real is that document? Because a lot of people, of course, have suggested, haven't they, Bryce, that this is just a screenplay. And I think even our friend Brian Bender was skeptical at the conference you were at last weekend, suggesting that it really does. It does read a little bit like a screenplay.
Before we get deeper into it, let me ask a couple of questions here that maybe you know the answer to. And I honestly, in preparation for this episode we're doing, not only did I read your fine book, In Plain Sight, and read your chapter on this, but I also read Richard Dolan's original article about it, listened to him talk about it in one of his podcasts, and actually reread the memo. So I feel all tuned up, if you will. But there were two things that struck me, and I really feel we should get to them. One is these are the notes of Dr. Eric Davis, and these are the most complete notes I've ever seen. And he obviously didn't take them in real time. And I know that my memory being what it is, I could never have done what he did here. Ross, do we know if Eric Davis has a photographic memory? Because I can't see how he did it.
Friends of Eric have actually vouched for the fact that he does have the most extraordinary memory. But as you'll see in the course of our analysis by reading this document, I suspect there was a tape rolling. I suspect that there was a digital recorder. So let me roll back a little bit.
Let me just ask you one. Before you do, though, I just want to ask this other question that I feel you might know because you really researched it. What's the provenance of the chain of title? This thing was found in Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell's garage. How did it get there?
Okay, Edgar Mitchell was part of the National Institute of Discovery Science, which was established by Robert Bigelow, the aerospace entrepreneur. And Bigelow funded Edgar to be part of the scientific advisory panel for NIDS when it was doing its investigations into UAPs and, frankly, the paranormal at places like Skinwalker Ranch. But it all goes back a lot earlier to a meeting that took place in 1997 between Dr. Stephen Greer of the what does he call himself these days? The Disclosure Project,
Yeah.
A controversial figure in ufology. But I will credit Tim. He absolutely right that this meeting took place. So he turned up at the Pentagon and had a meeting with the then Deputy Director of the DIA, Admiral Tom Wilson. And attending that meeting was a woman called Shari Adamiak, who was one of Edgar Mitchell's co-colleagues on the Disclosure Project. Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut, who probably got them in the door at the DIA because he's an astronaut and people let astronauts in the door in circumstances where they otherwise wouldn't. And there was also Commander Willard Miller, who was a former military colleague of Admiral Tom Wilson, who facilitated the introduction to the Admiral. And in that meeting, it was put by Greer to the Admiral that there were things being concealed inside the Department of Defense that he ought properly to be investigating. And if we are to believe the Admiral Wilson memo, what happened as a result of that meeting was what is detailed in the transcripts of this so-called Admiral Wilson memo, the EWD notes. And they record what Admiral Tom Wilson told, allegedly, Dr. Eric Davis in 2002, August 2002, almost 20 years ago to the day, in a car park at EG&G, the apocryphal organisation that does a lot of logistics for Area 51. And they allegedly sat in the back of a car in the EG&G car park in Las Vegas and had this conversation.
And by the way, you do an injustice to our anniversary. It wasn't August, it was October 16th.
October. You're absolutely right.
This literally is the 20th anniversary week.
Yeah.
So happy anniversary, Wilson Davis memo. And Ross and I, we did not bake a cake because neither of us are good at baking cakes, but we did get our respective documents out and highlight them. Now, admittedly, Ross, last episode, I said maybe we need to do a dramatic interp of this thing and read it. And foolishly, we've decided to do exactly that. Not read the entire thing, folks, but it has been accused of reading like a screenplay, like we said. So I guess the luck of the draw is that I will be playing. This is so ridiculous. I'll be playing Eric Davis today, and Ross, you'll be playing Thomas Wilson.
Admiral Tom Wilson.
Okay. So, folks, just if you've got your own, we're starting on page 8 here. There was a lot of stuff that Ross, brought up earlier that precedes it, but this is kind of the tone of the thing. And we just thought, it might be interesting to be driving in a car or relaxing, watching your YouTube or whatever, and just sort of hear it read out loud and ask yourself, for your own purposes, does it sound authentic? So I'm going to start with Eric Davis on page 8, who says, so what special access program compartment did you find this in?
Core secret, won't say.
Code name?
Again, won't say. Core secret.
Who was the project contractor or U.S. government agency that runs the program?
An aerospace technology contractor, one of the top ones in the U.S.
Who?
Core secret. Can't tell.
Defense contractor?
Yes, the best of them.
Intelligence, too?
In their corporate portfolio.
Give a hint?
Sorry, no.
What happened when you found the contractor?
I made several calls, end of May 97, first to Paul, Mike, and Perry, their senior Defense Department officials, to confirm I had the right contractor and program manager to talk to.
Did they confirm?
Yeah.
Then?
Made 3 calls, end of May 1997, to the program manager, one of them conference call with security director and corporate attorney. Confusion on their part as to why I was looking for them and what I wanted from them or wanted to know about. Very testy tone from all of them.
What do you mean?
They were agitated about my calling, surprised by call.
What you asked them?
Yeah.
What was that? What words?
I read their program record in the USDAT, the office of the Undersecretary for Defense, something or other in technology, Special Programs Record Group, and wanted to know about their crashed UFO program, what their role in that was, what they had. Also asked if they knew of MJ12 or some such organization code relating to crashed, recovered UFO craft.
Reaction on phone to that?
Yes, asked who I talked to before I called them. So I told them, and they weren't happy with that answer.
You mean about Perry and Paul, etc.?
Oh, no, I didn't tell them I talked to those guys.
Whom else do you talk to?
There were the other program managers I called.
You didn't mention that before.
Thought I said something.
Who were they?
3 programs who said they weren't who I was looking for. 4 programs that referred me back to the present threesome.
Why the latter?
Because they were part of it, in different compartments, placed in different layers of the compartment's pyramid, split up to do different things or parts of it. They're all in same records group, but their connection to each other is not obvious. Typical thing, but unusual in records.
What then?
I told Threesome I wanted a formal briefing, a tour, etc. Was exploiting my regulatory authority as Deputy Director DIA, Assistant Joint Chief of Staff, J2. Told them my not being briefed was oversight they needed to correct. I demanded.
And by the way, I'm enjoying this so much, Ross, because I've got the easy part. All I have to do is ask questions. But actually, you have still more from Thomas Wilson there.
Sure. They needed to discuss this, his demand, so hung up. Got called 2 days later, and they said they don't want to talk on phone, and arranged for face-to-face meeting at their facility.
Did you go?
Yes. 10 days later, mid-June or so. Flew out there. Met in their conference room in their secret vault. 3 of them show up.
The 3 guys with whom you had the telecon?
Yes, same 3. Security Director, NSA, retired, a CI, counterintelligence expert. Program Director, Corporate Attorney. Called themselves the Watch Committee, or Gatekeepers.
Why that phrase or name?
I asked. They said they were formed out of necessity to protect themselves after a near disaster in the past almost blew their cover. Something to do with an agreement that was reached with a couple of Pentagon SESs, Senior Executive Services, overseeing SAP, Special Access Programs, in those days. We're vague about when that was.
Well, what was this?
Let me finish. They said years ago in the past, an audit investigation led to them, and it wasn't supposed to, nearly outed. A battle, a nasty back and forth between them and the investigator and his Pentagon chief ensued, like a tug of war for program transparency. They told me money was the issue. Their hiding out became the other issue. Some kind of threat was leveled to blow the lid off them, so they backed down and let the investigator in to complete his job. They work very hard to keep the program hidden.
So what happened with that?
He was officially briefed, given a tour, and shown their program.
Did they show him a craft or hardware they said was alien or from a UFO?
Didn't say more about that. Said that after that episode, a formal agreement was struck with Pentagon people, the Special Access Program Oversight Committee, SAPOC, to prevent this in future. Didn't want to repeat. Special criteria were established in agreement. A special circumstance that must meet rigorous access criteria set by contractor committee. No U.S. government personnel are to gain access unless they meet the criteria, to be administered by contractor committee, the program director, the attorney, the security director, irregardless of the tickets and position U.S. government personnel possessed. Literally, their way or the highway.
So what are the criteria?
I asked for that, and they refused to give an answer. I was mad. Implication is now, to me, they operate without official oversight or any justification. Politically dangerous place to be. The threesome were concerned with whom I'd talked to at the Pentagon or elsewhere by phone, fax, or email. They wanted an accounting of the conversations, concerned about new exposure. The purpose of the meeting was to tell me this.
What?
That they weren't going to let me in the door.
Why?
They said my tickets were all confirmed and valid, but I was not on the bigot list. My tickets alone weren't enough. I didn't meet the special criteria, so need to know authorization was not being granted. Went back and forth with them over these points, primarily with security director and attorney.
By the way, just I love the fact that need to know makes an appearance in the documents, but enough
Nice
of
of
that.
them to give us a mention, wasn't it?
On you go, Thomas Wilson.
Argued more, they wouldn't accept my arguments that they fell under my statutory oversight and regulatory authority as Deputy Director DIA, under purview for my right to have, need to know, oversight, audit, justification issues, etc., etc. Regulatory and statutory authority as Deputy Director DIA wasn't relevant or pertinent to the nature of their program. Then they pulled out their bigot list to convince me otherwise. Several pages long, dated 1990, updated 1993.
Who was on it? Did you recognize any names?
That is core secret. Willing to say that most were program employees, names and titles, job titles, civilians, didn't recognize any military personnel, could be there.
Any politicians?
No White House names, no president, no congressional people, no congressional staffers.
Any of them in the Clinton or Bush senior administrations?
No, but a handful of names were Pentagon individuals I recognized. A few from the Office of the Undersecretary Defense. What's A in OSDAT? Do you know?
It's as you said. I don't know what the A is, but the T is technology.
Defense and something in technology. One from another department, another at the NSC, who is Pentagon SES employee. Program manager said they were not any weapons program, not any intelligence program, not any special op or logistics program. Doesn't fit these categories. I asked them what they were then. Loud groan from program manager. Security director and attorney say it's okay to say it.
Say what?
Drum roll here, boys. This is big.
I don't have my special effects, but in the final edit, we can put that in.
Here we go.
There you go.
They were a reverse engineering program. Something recovered years ago in the past. Technological hardware was recovered. So I thought they meant recovered Soviet, Chinese, etc. hardware and reverse engineering, like a missile or intelligence platform or aircraft. Actually came to the meeting expecting to find a sensitive foreign collection and reverse engineering operation. Thought UFOs was used as a cover for that. So I said that, and they said they weren't that either. They had program manager talking a craft, an intact craft they believed could fly. Space, air, water, dimensions. Was it from overseas or not? They said no, could not be, not possible. Why, I asked. Where did it come from? Program manager said they didn't know where it was from. They had some ideas on this. It was technology that was not of this earth, not made by man, not made by human hands. Said they were trying to understand and exploit technology. Their program was going on for years and years with very slow progress. Agonizingly slow, with little or no success. Painful lack of collaboration to get help from outside community of experts and facilities to assist effort. Must remain isolated and use own facilities and cleared personnel. Tough environment to work. About 400 to 800 bigot list count workers, varying in number with funding or personnel changes. Miller questions asked. These are the questions from Commander Miller. Roswell, craft, bodies, autopsies. Holloman, Air Force Base, landing. MJ-12 and leaked documents. Lonnie Zamora and Bentwaters, RAF Bentwaters in England. This is his answer. They were mum, declined to discuss these. Tom Wilson, I threatened to go to SAPOC to complain, gain access to their program. They said, go ahead, do what you must. I was angry because they defied my authority to be read in with good logical reason, wouldn't budge. Their tone was very testy, terse throughout the conversation.
Now, I have a new line here, but I just have to stop us for just a second. That was more than a mouthful. First of all, nice rendition. I wanted to just point out one thing to people. There is one line in this document that has been put in italics by Dr. Davis, who apparently authored this. And it is the line that Ross said earlier. It was technology that was not of this earth, not made by man, not by human hands. I mean, there it is in black and white in this document. So basically, the reason people are fussing and fighting about whether this document is real or not real is that if it's real, well, there you go. There it is in black and white. If it's not real, then, whatever. Also, because I'm a kind of an aficionado of the MJ12 documents, to actually see them mentioned in here in not a disparaging way, but as an authentic way, really was quite a shock to me. So with having said that, let me get to the next line from Eric Davis, who said, what was the outcome?
Meeting broke up. I returned to Washington.
What about Corso? And by that, we're talking about Philip Corso, the author of The Day After Roswell, which, frankly, I believe had come out right around the time that 1997 briefing was going on in Washington. So what about Corso?
Greer talked about Corso on April 9th, which was that 1997 meeting. Miller showed me the book during 2-hour private conversation. Didn't have time to read it through. Didn't buy a copy. Didn't bring Corso up at meeting. But comparing the Corso story to what I learned at meeting is more than enough to believe Corso told truth about seeing alien hardware, etc.
Did you complain to SAPOC or SAPOC?
Yes, called the subgroup members, senior review group members, to a meeting at Pentagon. Told them what happened at meeting. They responded that they would sustain the contractor on their access denial. So I ended up arguing with them a while. Broke up in 20 minutes and they would meet me in 2 or 3 days. Got the call 2 days later, near end of June, and met again with senior review group members.
When?
Before last week of June, 97. They told me that they were sustaining the contractor, that I was to immediately drop the matter and let it go. Forget about it, as I didn't have purview over their project. It didn't fall within my oversight, etc. I became very angry, started yelling when I should have kept my mouth shut.
Miller and Greer said you nearly got busted.
Close to that. Told Miller, senior review group chairman, said if I didn't follow their suggestion, I would not see director DIA promotion, get early retirement, lose 1 or 2 stars along the way. Really incredibly angry, upset over this, livid. Why such a big deal over this, considering the position of trust I have in the Pentagon? I do have relevant regulatory statutory authority over their program. That's my position.
Is it because funding comes from you or through you, or the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency?
Core secret. Can't answer.
Okay, back to the bigot list. Can you describe the type of people on it?
Corporate types, scientists and technicians, engineers, scientists, managers, etc.
Any military organizations that you recognized?
None. Just OSDAT people and 2 on the Special Access Program Oversight Committee. 1 of a Pentagon office. In December 97, Paul was out as the USDAT. He left the government. So was Mike Kay, replaced 2.
By whom?
Jacques Kanzler was the new USDAT, started December 97. Mike Kay was replaced by Brigadier General M. Ward from the Air Force.
Were Paul Kay and Mike Kay and Jacques Gansler and General Ward the ones on the bigot list that you recognized?
Won't answer that. Talked to Gansler in January 1998 about my June 97 meetings. He was briefed by someone, surprised me.
What did he say?
UFOs are real. So-called alien abductions Not real. Gansler said this.
What else?
Told to drop the matter. No more discussion about it.
Were you willing to talk to Hal Puthoff and Kit Green? And then they went on and discussed who they are and the remote viewing program history. Wilson was not familiar with the names, heard about the remote viewing program in 90. Maybe not for Hal, would think about it. No response on Kit Green. Prefers never to talk to anyone else about this again. Risks exposure. Better to stop talking, cut it off here.
What will you do with this? Now, I actually think it's important at this moment, Bryce, to make the point that I think this is an implicit admission that he's asking Eric Davis, what will you do with this?
Yeah.
It sounds to me like he's looking down at a recorder, maybe a digital recorder sitting on the car seat between them. Or at least he's acknowledging that Eric's taking notes of some kind. But there's a reference. What will you do with this?
I mean, you could, I guess, make the argument that by this, he's like this with this talk we've had. But I do think the recorder makes more sense, particularly based on how detailed this is. Anyway, this is the last thing that Eric Davis says in response to that. I'll keep it for private, personal research, data collection to track down the story and ascertain the signal noise in media and from government sources. We'll keep mouth shut, etc., etc.
I think we'll wrap it there, to be honest. Otherwise, we get people bogged down in complications. But
I just
suffice to say, Bryce, it does read like a transcript. Either that or it reads like a screenplay. So if it is a fabrication, it's a very, very clever fabrication.
Well, here's the thing. For people that make fake documents, you usually, if you're making a fake document, you try to make it look like a real document. So if you were making not to get too convoluted here, but if you were really just trying to make a fake document, the last thing you'd want anybody to say about your fake document is that it reads like a screenplay, right? You'd want it to be in a different format than if you were looking for it to be accepted. This looks to me, as I heard us reading it and read it myself a couple of times, like somebody who is literally just had a really impressive meeting and is desperately trying to write it all down. And I know, because both of us, have worked in the news and investigation business. I've spent my own time in cars after I've talked to somebody and knowing how quickly my brain is going to lose the specifics and just stream of consciousness, got everything down as fast as I could do it. I'm sure you have your own way, but if you were in a situation where you had that long of a conversation with someone, what would you have done afterwards?
I would have definitely recorded it with Eric's permission, of course. With Tom Wilson's permission. But I assume there's an implicit admission there that there's something going on that he's referring to. What will you do with that? And in my book, I speculate that he's pointing down at a digital recorder. But it is speculation. We just don't know. Other friends of Eric have told me that Eric has a phenomenal memory. But we should emphasize, when I communicated with Admiral Tom Wilson for my research, and he's adamant that this meeting with Eric Davis never took place, that no such admissions were made, and that the memo is a hoax, that it's a fake. But the reason why this is significant is because, of course, we know that Congress is about to hold hearings. And if there are going to be people coming forward, one of the people or two of the people that should be being called, maybe Commander Willard Miller as well should be being called, but certainly Commander Willard Miller, Eric Davis, and Admiral Tom Wilson should all be deposed and asked, did this meeting take place? What do you know?
And let's face it, Mike Gallagher, the congressman, during the May 17th meeting provided the hearings on Capitol Hill, provided, I thought, some of the most dramatic stuff by simply demanding that the Wilson Davis memo that we've just read out loud be put into the congressional record. So if it's important, it wouldn't be really hard to find out if this had reality to it or not. You really do just drag the people in and you put them under oath and you ask them these questions.
Now, I want to emphasize I'm skeptical of the Wilson memo, and I have to be, because neither Eric Davis nor Tom Wilson will publicly vouch for its veracity as a record of true events. But at the same time, there are a whole series of circumstantial reasons to take the memo seriously. And that's my position. My position is that we can't rely on anything the memo says. It doesn't prove a thing right now, but it should be being investigated. And that's what's heartening about Representative Mike Gallagher's decision to put the document on the public record in the Congress, because it flags an intention that the Congress is going to take a closer interest in this document. I also temper my understanding of the document with the fact that I have spoken to people who purport to be knowledgeable about what they refer to as the program. And they assert that there is a back engineering, a reverse engineering program going on in the US government, which is actually conducted in part, mainly, in private aerospace. So it's at least consistent with the drift of the Admiral Wilson memo that at some stage, the whole program was moved out of government, probably out of the Department of Energy, and into a private aerospace company where it's remained for much of the last few decades.
If it's a fake, there would be things within it that, I mean, there would usually be things within it that were of questionable efficacy. So my question to you is, as I looked through it, I didn't see anything that I thought was wrong, that was a mistake, that was clearly invalid. Did you?
No, I didn't. And that's my gripe with some of the MJ12 documents, is some of them are very obviously forgeries. You know, they've used signatures from former presidential documents that are acknowledged as real documents. So I have an issue, frankly, with the MJ12 documents. You wouldn't hang a mangy dog, as we would say in Australia, on the
Do you
MJ12.
feel the same? Now, there is a whole collection of MJ12 documents, and this is not
the earlier ones are more interesting. But
yeah, the Eisenhower briefing document that was written supposedly in November of 1952, as Eisenhower had been elected and was being briefed into a program he probably already knew things about. That one reads pretty good to me. But again, there are things that people can take issue with. I'm not sure what you would take issue with in this thing factually, maybe stylistically. And again, just because I think now it's more important than ever. Tell our listeners and viewers one more time how this document became public, how it ended up in an astronaut's garage after his death.
Okay, the document was given to Edgar Mitchell, the lunar module pilot on the Apollo 14 mission, because Edgar was on the science advisory panel for the National Institute of Discovery Science, which was funded by Robert Bigelow, the aerospace entrepreneur. And as part of a bundle of documents that came out of Edgar Mitchell's estate after he died, I'm very, very clear in my mind, because I've spoken to the person who facilitated the release of those documents from Edgar Mitchell's estate, who was a very close friend of Edgar Mitchell. I am absolutely certain that the provenance of this document is very, very clear, that Edgar received it probably soon after the 2002 meeting, allegedly, between Eric Davis and Admiral Tom Wilson, and that whether it records an accurate version of a conversation between Eric Davis and Admiral Tom Wilson or not, it was almost certainly brought into the files, the paperwork of Edgar Mitchell shortly thereafter, faxed probably by Hal Puthoff from the National Institute of Discovery Science to Edgar Mitchell, and that Edgar Mitchell informed himself about the contents of that document and indeed referred to this meeting in numerous interviews that took place over the following years. And there is indeed mild corroboration of certain aspects of the conversation that took place between Eric Davis and Admiral Tom Wilson, which lead me to be more convinced than not that the conversation did take place. And let me hasten to add as well, Bryce, that nobody should reflect adversely on Admiral Tom Wilson if he is lying about this, because as a security official who's responsible for preserving America's most important national secrets, if you are the holder of a security oath and you're bound by your security oath, and if this is a waived, unacknowledged special access program of some kind, as we suspect that it is, you are legally obliged to lie.
Correct. And I don't think anything less of him. In fact, if anything, as I first read this and as I heard it read just now by you, I felt an emotional response to him. If this is the real thing and this really describes what he went through, let's all pause for a moment and think about that. Here is the guy who's in charge of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He is basically J2. He's like he's at the top of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for intelligence.
Yeah, he's the intelligence briefer for the Joint
Right.
Chiefs of Staff.
Okay. So
you don't get much higher.
Anybody who should be able to make the argument that, if you're working on something, I'd like to know about it, and who's received the warm embrace of the U.S. government to be able to keep a secret, it would be Tom Wilson. And so his frustration in the reading and even watching the use of Eric Davis with the triple exclamation marks on some of these things, you just really feel how frustrating that would be. Imagine this is your job. You are supposed to be helping brief people about the security challenges the United States of America is up against. And there's a program you're aware of that they're confirming, and they won't read you into it. And you're the guy.
More importantly, my friend, I think the thing that leaps out to me as a lawyer in that document is that the organization that is meant to be the sovereign of America, your Congress, which is meant to be government of the people, for the people, by the people, it's not briefed into this.
Neither is the president.
Why Congress is pissed. And same with the president. The president is not in on the.
I mean, for years, we've been playing the game on these UFO podcasts where people go, well, what do you think this president knew or didn't know? And it's been an, item to be bandied about. In fact, I wrote an entire television series, if you will, about what a president knew or didn't know when I did Dark Skies for NBC. So the idea that the president doesn't get told is not surprising to me, but to see it there in black and white is unnerving, if that's the right word, because it does mean that there is another power structure that is dealing with this besides the power structure that's supposed to be dealing with these things as laid out in our Constitution. So it's
more importantly, you can see why the Congress would be worried about accountability.
Yep.
I mean, let's assume it's true. Let's assume that there is a secret back engineering, reverse engineering program going on inside the US government. I can understand, especially during the Cold War, the instinct to keep it secret, the need to try to preserve the secrecy of what, after all, is a momentous admission that the United States is in possession of non-human technology, advanced technology. But it's the issue that it hasn't been brought to the attention of the Congress that's the key issue. And if ever there was a national security issue that ought properly to be known by the Congress, this is it.
And here's your moment of Zen, folks, if you're listening or you're watching right now. Let's all take just a second and consider this. If there is crash wreckage, it goes back to at least 1947. And according to some cases, maybe even further. If it's real and it existed, and if the phenomenon is authentic and exists and is some kind of non-human intelligence that's interacting with us, if those things are true, we've gone 8 decades nearly now, 8 decades where a basic fact of how the universe operates has not been opened up and discussed with us. And the US government itself now seems to have become blinded, as the public has been. So just to pick up on what you were saying, Ross, I've always thought that probably I'm a believer that Roswell is true and authentic event, more or less as it's described. And that I'm quite certain that when Roswell happened, it was a military operation. I mean, obviously, we just won World War II, and the military gets it. And who's the president going to appoint to look into it? Military and national security people. But it seems clear, if this memo is true, that what has happened over the years is the government itself has offshored a great deal of the research and the work on this topic to private enterprise, mostly aerospace firms here in Southern California, where I am. And that's a shocker, because what that means with compartmentation that happens with security, we've been over 8 decades blinding our officials more and more and more, to the point where, yeah, you've now got senators like Gillibrand and Rubio waking up and going, wait a second, what's going on here? And who can blame them? I mean, who can really blame them?
Well, at the very least, it poses a question that needs to be answered. And we shouldn't be frightened of asking the question, even if it turns out that the memo is a hoax. At least it can be resolved. I don't think it is a hoax. That's my gut instinct.
Yeah.
We'd better think about wrapping up, mate,
Yeah,
because
we
we're getting
should.
pretty close to a full hour here. And I know our audience have got better things to do than to listen to us prattling on about a memo that may or may not be real. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that we may get answers to the conundrum, the mystery of the Admiral Wilson memo, possibly as early as maybe early 2023.
Man, that would be just shocking. Listen, I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed reading that. I enjoyed hearing you read it.
Core secret.
But nobody does core secrets as good as you. And by the way,
core secret.
I freaking love that. I'm going to put that on.
There's got to be a movie one day, Bryce, called
Core Secrets. That's the title of my next movie. Yeah. But let's end it with this. Let's tell people what core secrets is supposed to mean. What is a core secret?
The biggest secrets of all. The secrets so secret that if you reveal them, they irrevocably compromise United States national security.
And we can understand why a UFO reality would be a core secret. What do you think other core secrets might be?
Oh, I can imagine maybe the ingredients to how to make a nuclear bomb. And let's just also say, Bryce, maybe also, what do they really know about the JFK assassination?
Well, okay. Now I know we're wrapping up, so we're gonna have to bring that up in another episode because that one gets me going. I even wrote a book about it. So yeah, we'll be back. Anyway, it's been fun. I've enjoyed this. We'll continue to follow this, and let's just hope that as we get into 2023, there'll be more answers than there are questions coming forward.
Back another time soon with another episode of Need to Know. Thanks for watching.
Catch you later.